Well, Shane, thank you so much for joining us here on the Royal Ramble Round Table Discussion.
It's an easy night for me, bro. I've been used to getting hit with chairs and thrown through tables. Just sit in a nice place like this, eat some good food, have a good discussion. This is a night off for me, man.
I thank you so much for being with me. I had a couple questions for you. We're going to talk for about 30 minutes about a lot of things to do with your career and maybe some other things. I'd like to start out with a solid question. I wanted to talk about the time you spent with the Radicals, Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Perry Saturn, and to me as a fan in WCW, that faction was awesome because Shane Douglas was in it, and then that faction comes to the WWE and everyone's there, but there's no Shane Douglas. And I never understood why you didn't come or what exactly happened to how you did not come back to the WWE at that time.
Well, first, like you say, that Shane Douglas was in it, but for me, I've always been, like whether it was the original Triple Threat, the Triple Threat, me, Bam Bam, and Chris Candido that got big, the Radicals, the New Blood, whatever it was, I had an incredible group of wrestlers standing next to me. So to be the mouthpiece for Benoit Malenko, or later Candido and Bigelow, or later Perry Saturn, Benoit and Malenko, that was a very easy position because I'm talking about three great wrestlers, in those three incarnations. How could I go wrong? I mean, they were phenomenal performers and athletes in their own right. And to be the mouthpiece for that just made it all that much easier. And when it gets difficult, it's when you take a kid or a wrestler that's maybe not quite at that level. He's in a building process or he's in a learning process and not quite to that level. And then suddenly, you're putting him in a main event position. That's tough to tell to fans sitting at home and watching, who can clearly see that this guy's not at that level. That was never the case with Benoit, Malenko, Candido, Bigelow, or Perry Saturn and Benoit Malenko. So for me, it was really easy to be able to talk about those guys in a legitimate way because they were all legitimate as fuck. I mean, they all were phenomenal at what they did and led to what I would say. So for me to go out and talk about them, all I had to do was shoot. This is Chris Benoit, this is Dean Malenko, this is Perry Saturn, Chris Candido, or Bam Bam Bigelow. All of them had their own sway, and there's no surprise that now, all these years later, all of those guys are looked at with such affinity and such respect from the wrestling audience, because all of those guys in their own right have made their own way in the business prior to us being together in a Triple Threat incarnation or the Radicals. So that was easy for me, the easy part. The harder part for me in that was all of those guys I just mentioned. I was such a fan of their work, and as the mouthpiece and as the supposed leader of these incarnations, I had to show that I was capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with these guys, and otherwise I'm illegitimate. If these guys are up here and Shane Douglas is just here, so for me I had the double duty of not only going out and running my mouth and getting these groups over, but then going out and performing at an equal level or close to equal with those guys. So that was the harder part for me. Why I didn't end up in the WWF was very simple. We had left, we had talked about this at length. None of us were happy about where things were going in WCW. We didn't like the fact that they were going against the grain and going against the guys that were pushing for us, the Radicals and other young guys in the company, and going back to a throwback, back to, we gave this 2 weeks and it didn't get over, so let's go back to something. Let's go back to Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair. Nothing against those guys, two of the biggest names in the history of our business. But by that time in 2000, 2001, 2002, it wasn't 1984 anymore. The wrestling fans were yearning for something more and something different. Chris Benoit had cut his chops on that. Dean Malenko over decades had proven his ability in the ring, as had I and Perry Saturn. But when the company decided to fire Vince Russo and that whole incarnation of the booking committee, and then go back to this Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair generation, for us, we knew what that meant, the writing on the wall. And at that stage of our career, none of us felt very good about going out and putting over Ric Flair or Hulk Hogan again. It was something that needed much more, and that was where us and the company went to longer jams. Unbeknownst to me, the night that we were told to leave Monday Nitro, we were in Columbus, Ohio. We had met back at the hotel in Columbus, staying right there on the airport. And we all went and packed our bags. We had late flights out. And we went downstairs and we shared a couple bottles of wine. And I told all of them, this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to play out. I knew Vince didn't give a shit about me because he had already done this routine before. I knew that Vince didn't really have a big eye for Perry Saturn because Perry could wrestle his ass off, and that didn't weigh very high on value to Vince. But I knew that Vince wanted Chris Benoit in the worst way, and he wanted Eddie Guerrero in the worst way. So I knew that me and Dean and Perry were expendable in Vince's mind. I know how Vince thinks. So I warned him about that, and I said, if we don't agree to all stick together, Vince will divide and conquer. And as soon as any one of us allows him into our head, he'll find the split there and he'll break it off from the rest, and we'll all sink. They all agreed over the 2 bottles of wine. We all agreed over handshakes and hugs that we would share any and all information that any of us got in the upcoming days. Wednesday of that week, that was Monday night, Wednesday of that week, I got a phone call from Bruce Pritchard asking me if we were serious about coming as a group and those sorts of things. And then he said, well, we need you to all sign your releases from WCW before we can negotiate with you. When an entity, if I'm playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Cincinnati Bengals can't call and say, hey, we'd like to sign you to a contract until I'm free and clear from the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I understood that, but I also understood the politics of wrestling. And when I said to Bruce, well, before we sign that release, what kind of money are we talking? And he said, well, we really can't discuss that until you sign your release. And I said, Bruce, look, I know you're not legally allowed to be talking to me right now. So let's cut the bullshit. Tell me what kind of money we're talking about, and I'll be happy to disseminate that to the guys. And we'll make our decision based off of that. Unbeknownst to me, after that discussion, they had contacted Eddie, Chris, and Dean, and I guess Perry, all 4 of them, and had set up a separate deal with them, which is fine. I mean, all of these guys, we all ultimately make decisions for our own families. But the thing that irked me at that time was that over those 2 bottles of red wine at the Holiday Inn on the Columbus Airport property, and the handshakes and hugs that we had, to me, that's solid. If I give my word to you and my handshake to you, you don't ever have to question again. You don't need it in paper, on contract, whatever. You can take it to the bank. And I thought the same with these guys. About Saturday of that week, I get a phone call from Vince Russo asking where I was. I said, well, I'm in Pittsburgh. Why? And he said, are you sure about that? Which I thought was a strange response. And I said, hey, do you want to talk to my wife? She's standing right here. And he said, no. He said, wondering because he had just gotten a phone call from the manager of the Radisson Hotel in Stamford, Connecticut, saying that his boys were checking in. Well, when Vince at that time said his boys, he was talking about me, Dean, Perry, Chris, the whole gang. So when he told me that, I said, well, hold on, I'll call you right back. I hung up and called Dean Malenko, and Dean answered on the first or second ring. And Dean and I used to have this thing where we would say, hey, I got to tell you, say something. Don't say a word, let me finish before you say anything. And Dean and I used to do that quite often with each other. And I said that to him. I said, let me just get through what I have to say and then give me your response. And I said, I'm hearing that you've got, well, I'm getting ahead of myself in the story. Before this happened, before I made the phone call to Dean, Vince had called me and said, have you called anybody yet? And I said I hadn't. And the reason I hadn't made any phone calls was there was a part of me that I didn't want my friends to believe I didn't trust them. So and another part of me that didn't want to find out.
When you say Vince, you're saying Vince Russo called you.
Yes. And then there was another part of me that, I have a very bad temper, and I try the best I can to keep it under control. And there was a part of me that if I find out these guys lied to me, I'll lose my fucking mind. So I didn't make the phone call, and Vince called and asked, and I said, no, not yet. And he said, what are you waiting for? And I hung the phone up with Vince Russo, and my ex-wife said to me, she was pregnant at the time with our first son. And she said, well, why haven't you called? And I told her, I don't want my friends to think I don't trust them, and if they are there, I'm going to lose my mind. And she said, look, if you call, they're not there. Only you and I know you made that phone call. And if they are there, then you know what you have to do to cover your ass. So, no, she's right. So I called the Radisson Hotel, and I asked for Chris Benoit first. And the person on the phone said they couldn't give me information. I said, well, this is Shane Douglas. They're my partners, and I'm trying to reach them. And, oh, Shane Douglas is a big fan. And he immediately told me that Chris Benoit had just checked in. When I gave him Perry Satullo's name, Perry Saturn's real name, he checked on it and came back and said, much to my chagrin, yes, he's checked in. Eddie Guerrero was checked in. But when it came to Dean Malenko, he said, no Malenko listed. So I thought to myself, I was thinking to myself, why would those guys be there and not Dean? But maybe Dean in this earlier phone call was telling me the truth. And in that earlier phone call, he had told me, and these were his exact words, I swear to you on Julie and Larissa, his wife and daughter, I swear to you on Julie and Larissa's life, I would never lie to you. I'm in my beach house in Florida. So when I hung up and I called Vince Russo back, I said, look, I can't speak for the others, but I can tell you with absolute certainty, Dean Malenko's in Florida. And he said, well, I don't want to call anybody a liar, Shane, but my guy from the Radisson called and told me they're checking in, which is when I called the Radisson Hotel. When he verified for me that Dean was checked in, that Perry was checked in, that Eddie was checked in, but no Dean Malenko. And, I'm thinking, well, at least he wasn't lying to me. I was pissed, but at least he wasn't lying to me. And just as I got ready to hang the phone up, it popped into my head that Dean always uses the name Dean Malenko, except when he wants to kayfabe. And it's rare that he does it, but once in a great while he will. So I said, can you check one more name for me? Can you check the name Simon? And the guy punched me. He said, yeah, we have a Simon listed, but it's a woman. I said, would it be Shelley Simon by chance? And he said, yeah, how'd you know? And that was Dean Malenko. That's Dean Malenko's real name. And I remember, like, my blood boiling. That A, my friend would lie to me. B, he would lie to me and swear on his wife and daughter. I just saw red instantly. But at the time, I knew exactly what was happening. Vince had gone and done exactly what I warned those guys about, divide and conquer. Vince knew that me, as the one that had had experience of working for him before, had the length of most tenure in the business, had been around. I'd worked for Dusty Rhodes, Bill Watts, all these guys. I knew Jim Crockett. I knew all the games they played. And I think these guys were a bit naive to that, having come from Japan for the most part. It's now Dean and I and Perry. Chris of course is gone, but we've long since put that behind us. I understand it, and when I called Dean and I said to him, are you there? I even said to him, look, if you're there, you have every right to be there. Take care of your family. But he knew, Dean and I were the closest to the four of us. And he knew, all the hell that my ex-wife and I had gone through to have a kid. And my wife was not pregnant with our first son. Deep into her pregnancy, 6-7 months into the pregnancy. Furthest we'd ever gotten along into a pregnancy at that point. And Dean knew the anguish that it caused me. And so when I said to him, look, if you're there, no problem. You're taking care of your family, I understand that. Allow me to take care of my family. And that's when he said, I swear to you on my wife and daughter that I'm here in Florida. And it really caused bad blood for a long time, because first of all, WCW, Diana Myers from WCW tried to put pressure on me because these guys had decided to leave. I had never signed a release. I had never asked for a release. And she tried to play hardball with me and called me and told me I had to sign this, and if I didn't sign it, she was going to this and that and the other thing. And luckily, for me, my attorney was my roommate from college. He's now a judge in upstate Ohio. So I knew that Eric Weissenberger had my back. He wasn't telling me something because it was a corporate tagline or he was making money from it. He was telling me the legal standpoint. And he told me, the legal leg to stand on. You have him by the ass. And we finally got Diana Myers on the phone, and he told her flat out, he said, look, you either start paying my client by the end of business day this date, we're going to file a massive lawsuit for breach of contract against WCW. And they hemmed and hawed and screamed and hollered and roared as much as they could. But at the end of that business day, I had a paycheck in my hand. But none of that was necessary. Had my friends not lied to me, that was why I didn't go to WWF. And I'd already been there once before. Twice before, actually, the ones where I really learned my lesson. And I knew that if Vince was really serious about having us, my God, what he could have done with those four. But if he was really serious, then he would lay money out on the table and said, this is how much money we're talking, this is the length of time we're talking, blah, 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 blah. And he wouldn't speak any of that with me. So I knew that at very least it was problematic for me, Perry, and Dean. Because I knew that out of those 5 names, he wanted Eddie and Chris badly, and with obvious reason.
Well, when you talk about the times that you were in the WWE before, if you go back to '91, I specifically remember you being in the '91 Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
Now, was that a one-shot deal? Was it a couple months? Like how long did you spend in the WWE?
I went there when I left. Johnny Ace and I were together in WCW, and I had gone with my knee. In fact, that I injured in Bluefield, West Virginia, right down the road. I was off for about 3.5 weeks, and the entire time that I was off, Jim Ross kept calling me at home and saying what problems they were having with Lex Luger and Sting and pressure Meyer, and that they were ungrateful for the amount of money that they were making, and this was multiple phone calls. This wasn't 1 or 2 phone calls. This was all month long as I'm off my the surgery I had to have on my knee. And they kept telling me, you know, when you get back, we're going to break you and Johnny up, give you a big singles push. So do the best you can to get in shape. And when you get back, we're going to give you this big singles push. So the first night that I was back was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I had just gotten there right before catering started. I sat down at the table, and Missy Hyatt, who I had met when I first went on the road to UWF, when Eddie Gilbert gave me my break back in 86, 85, 86, she came over and sat down with me, and she said, she had just come out of a production meeting, she was an announcer at the time. And she said, Shane, what did you do to get so much heat? They were talking horribly about you in that meeting. And I thought, well, you know, Missy, you know, sometimes could sort of mix things up in her head, you know, and so I thought, well, okay, you know, maybe she misunderstood something. But I heard what she said, and I went looking for Jim Ross. As I went looking for Jim Ross, I ran into Teddy Long, who was managing Mean Mark Callis at the time before he was the Undertaker. And Teddy was just, you know, another performer. He had no stroke in the company, wasn't in the office. And he had a clipboard. He said, okay, Shane, tonight in match whatever, you're going to be working with Mark here, and he's going to beat you in about 2 minutes with the hard punch. I'm like, no, he's not. I'll put him over, but he's not beating me in 2 minutes that way. And well, if you don't agree with that, then you can go take it up with the office. So I went immediately to find Jim Ross. And when I found Jim Ross used some very derisive language in talking about Teddy Long, and said, in essence, that stupid son of a bitch doesn't know what he's talking about. Go find Jody Hamilton. Jody will give you exactly what you're supposed to do. Now this sounds crazy, but at that time in WCW, that was completely typical for WCW. Person 1 would tell you black, person 2 would tell you white, person 3 would tell you gray, somebody else would tell you varying shades of white, somebody else would tell you varying shades of black. You couldn't get a straight answer from anybody. It's like trying to get a straight answer from Hillary Clinton. And so I went and found Jody Hamilton. When I walked into the room, Jody was sitting at a bench in the Baton Rouge Centerplex. The dressing rooms are set up like the old vaudeville. You know, they have the light bulbs around the mirror and the table about that wide right under the mirror. I walked in, and Jody wouldn't look at me. Like, say if you're me, he's sitting like this. And I come in and I said, what the hell's going on? Jim Ross tells me this, Teddy Long tells me that, Missy Hyatt says this, and like this. Again, you're me. One who look up and goes, well, Shane, I can tell you, you can do what the hell you're told to do tonight, or you can pack your shit and get the fuck out. And, the Pittsburgh in me came out, and I said, well, then you watch, you fat motherfucker, you watch me walk my Pittsburgh ass out of here, and I threw a can of garbage at him. And I went and got my bag, and as I was leaving, Wahoo McDaniel came and grabbed me and said, hey, you don't want to leave, kids, you're going to make a mistake, blah, blah, blah. And I was so far beyond it at that point. I had all the respect in the world for Wahoo, but I was so far beyond it at that point. And I said, Wahoo, look, I love you, I respect you, but I've had enough of this place, enough of the bullshit, I'm done. Tom Zank, Brian Pillman, and Johnny Ace then came and got me next in the parking garage. And Johnny's take was, don't walk out of your contract. If you walk out tonight, they'll fire you. You want to pay your contract, blah, blah, blah. Typical Johnny, smart business guy. But again, I was so far beyond it, I didn't give a shit about the contract. I was sick and tired of being screwed with like I was an idiot.
This is 1989?
This was 89, 90, like late 89 time frame. And so I wished them all well, got on the plane, and went to the Baton Rouge airport. As I was flying out, I had to connect to Atlanta. Out of respect for Eddie Gilbert, who had an incredible head on his shoulders for the business, and to give me my break in the business, I called Eddie, because he was still with WCW at the time. And I told him what was going on, and he said, look, don't take your flight all the way through to Pittsburgh tonight. Get off the plane in Atlanta, come in 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and talk to Jim Hurd, because apparently what was going on was something would get called in the office, i.e. we're going to give you this big singles push. That was what the office would call. They would get out to the field, whatever arena we were working at, and the stooges in that building, whether it was Jim Ross or whoever, would change it and twist it up the way that they wanted it, and then feed it back to the company. And Jim Hurd was none the wiser. The pizza man had no idea what the fuck was going on, what was up and down.
The pizza man.
Yeah.
What do you call him that?
Pizza Hut executive.
Oh, okay.
That's what,
Oh,
that
okay,
was,
yeah.
That was his background before he came
Gotcha.
to WCW. He ran Pizza Hut. Makes perfect sense to me. So I did. I stopped in Atlanta and I stayed at the Radisson, it was a Radisson Hotel we stayed at south of the airport. And bright and early the next morning, I got up, drove down to the CNN Center, went up to the 11th floor WCW offices. I sat there waiting for Jim Hurd to come in. Apparently, he had gotten a phone call overnight from somebody, because when he came in, he told me to follow him into his office. And he starts lecturing me. You know, you're about to make the biggest mistake of your career, and going through this whole spiel. And, with me, maybe I was just cut differently, or maybe it's my upbringing. That kind of threatening talk that went in one ear and out the other with me.
Don't work with the franchise.
It wasn't even that. I wasn't the franchise yet. It was just, look, if you value me as an employee, talk to me as an employee, and show me you have respect for me. If not, talk down to me and lecture me and threaten me, and I'll take the door in, because I've already got my mind made up to walk out the door. So you're threatening me, sure as hell ain't scared of me. And what none of them had known at that point was I had been talking with Pat Patterson for about 6-7 months at that point. Never asked for a job, never inquired about would they be interested in me. The only reason I was talking with him was Dominic Finucci, my trainer, had taught me, to stay in contact with all the people. He had introduced me to Pat Patterson. He said, stay in contact with him. I would call Pat and just ask him general questions about the business. Hey, what do you think about this or that or the other thing? And we would talk for 20-30 minutes on it. And had never asked him for a job. So when I got into Jim Hurd's office, rather than try to convince me to stay, he starts with the threatening, you're about to make the biggest mistake of your career, and if you do this, you're gonna never be welcome back, and blah, 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 which I knew was bullshit. And that had pretty much made my mind up, but what sealed the deal for me was, I don't know if you know this, I have 2 master's equivalencies, was accepted to medical school. I have 288 undergraduate hours, and taught school for about 6 years. So I could certainly understand business and business documents. And when he came into the office and starts doing this lecture, talking down to me thing, I want to show you something. And he's digging through his drawer, and he pulls it out, and he goes to hand it to me. As I reach for it, he pulls it back, and he goes, now I'm just going to tell you, being a wrestler, you're probably not going to be able to understand this. That's not on his hand. And he started explaining to me about how WCW was on the verge of kicking WWF's ass in the ratings. And this document was supposedly his proof. And at the top of it had the WWF ratings, which were like 7.9 at that time. And down below they had WCW, Mid-South, Memphis, Portland. They had like 6 or 7 of the territories that were still operating at that point. And combined, as I remember, it was like a 5.4 combined. All these companies combined together. We're still losing vastly to WWF. And when he starts to explain to me about how this document proves that WCW is on the verge of kicking WWF's ass, I said, do you understand this document? Because being a wrestler, I think I understand a little bit better than you. And when I pointed out to the numbers, then he started cussing. Well, you're going to make a fucking mistake on it. I said, Mr. Hurd, thank you for the opportunities. I'll go try my skills elsewhere. And that's what I did. That's why I left. When I went there in 1990, again, I had no promise of a spot. There was no, hey, we're going to bring you in and make you this character or that character. And if you remember at that time when they brought me in, they had me sort of middle of the card. I was working with guys like Paul Rum and Haku on the TVs, but they had never really decided on an idea for what we were going to do with Shane Douglas. Right as they did, my dad, who was a World War II vet, and I looked up to him as a superhero to me, came down with latter stage emphysema. And I went and talked to Vince, and it was either Niagara or Erie. I believe it was Niagara. I went and pulled Vince aside, and I told him that my dad was ill, and he couldn't live alone, had to live on oxygen, blah blah blah. And Vince went into this long 2-hour discussion with me about how family comes first, how much he appreciated my work. The door was always open. Go home, and if you ever decide to come back on the road, the door's open to you. And that was where I left it. I left at WWF in 1990, and it was, I think, right around December of 1990. I was there for about a year. And
During the 1990 Royal Rumble. I thought you were the 91 Royal Rumble.
I think it was the 91 Royal Rumble, but I think I went back for that.
So then you were there 3 times.
Challenge my memory. I was in it 91 and 92. And
92 you came to WCW, right? That's when you started.
93. I went back to WCW 93. I taught at school 91, 92, 93. My dad passed away in August of 93. And I went back to WCW after that.
And then you became Dean Douglas.
When I went there in 96, I left ECW. When ECW started, Eddie Gilbert was booking it. And, because you give him a break in the business.
Now, this is the Eastern Championship Wrestling.
Yes. Eddie called me and said, hey, we're starting something new here. A guy named Todd Gordon bought his company, Eastern Championship Wrestling, and he wants to do something big with it. And I kept telling him, no, thanks, but no thanks. So when I left after the Ricky Steamboat deal, when my shoulder needed operated on, I walked away from the business like an alcoholic staying out at the bar. I'm not going anywhere near it. And he kept calling me and sweetening the offer. And I finally, like the 5th phone call, I said, hey, he said, nothing to do with money. I said, this is about money. I told you at the ends of the earth. I said, I'm getting out of the business, getting away from it. I've had enough of the politics and the bullshit. And thank you for everything, but not coming back.
So you were ready to be done then?
I had told myself I was done.
Retired,
done, ready to move on with my life.
In 95?
93.
93.
93. And
wow.
He called me back and he said, how about if we were to give you our lead heel position? And I don't know if I'd ever spoken to anybody about it. I probably did somewhere along the lines. But I'd always said in the business that before I got out of the business, I wanted to learn all the aspects of my business. I wanted to learn booking. I wanted to learn why does the camera guy shoot it that way? Why does the director cut to that camera instead of that camera? Why is this guy a heel? Why is this guy a baby face? How do both of them execute their part of the deal? And he hooked me with that, and that interested me. And I honestly believed that ECW would be 1 or 2 and done. It was just a little independent company. I didn't see it having any future. When I got off the plane for that first taping, me and Terry Funk got picked up together at the Philadelphia airport, and Terry always calls me Shano. He'd sit behind me in the van, and he said, well, Shano, how long do you think we'll ride this train before it runs off the tracks? And he and I both concluded that it would be 2 or 3 months and ECW would be done. Very early on, like maybe the 2nd or 3rd taping, I was on the booking committee, and we were having a booking meeting, and it was me, Paul Heyman, Eddie's brother, that's what I wanted to say now on names, Doug Gilbert, and Todd Gordon, and 1 or 2 other people. We sat down to have the meeting. Eddie and Todd were whispering each other, and Eddie said, I'll be right back. And he got up and he walked out of the room. And we waited for about an hour. and he never came back. Todd called Paul out of the room and offered him the lead booker position, and he had quit. We were told Doug was shocked, I was shocked, and I think at that point I honestly believed it was just a matter of a month or so before Eddie would be back, and never came back, and subsequently ended up in the next few months dying in Puerto Rico. But that was 93, 4 and 5, I wrestled in ECW. And then 95, WWF contacted me and, laid out this incredible offer, and none of which ever came through. The money didn't come through, the position didn't come through.
What was on the table?
I was told by Vince McMahon that I would be making a guaranteed minimum, even though we don't guarantee contracts in the WWF, but it's not uncommon for somebody in your position as our lead heel to make a guaranteed minimum of $350,000 to $550,000 in base salary, plus your pay-per-views, plus your merchandising, plus. After that conversation with my wife and I, my ex-wife and I contacted everybody I had known that worked in a position there. Ricky Steamboat, both Road Warriors, Jake Roberts, Roddy Piper, Mr. Perfect, Bret Hart, and everybody Sherry Martel, everybody that I spoke to said that's exactly what he told us, and we got rich. So I dropped my guard and went. 4 months into my stint, I was working 28 days a month, starting in a semi-main event position. I called home one day and my ex-wife says to me, and she never swore, and I should say rarely swore, and almost never used the F word. But I called home and he said, where the fuck's all of our money? And I said, well, you've been getting the paychecks. She said, well, they haven't been very good. I said, well, it's not very good. So I hear her leafing through papers and she comes on and she says, 1,400. And I said, no, Carla, all of them together. And she said, that is all of them together. At which point my head about exploded off my shoulders. And Vince McMahon been standing in front of me at that point, I had choked with his eyeballs popped. I was livid and went to talk to him at the Meadowlands. At that time it was called the Continental Arena, I believe. And he kept putting me off. Let me talk to this person, let me talk to that person. And then finally Shawn Michaels and Scott Hall walked in. And they were in there for about 20 minutes, and I hear them in there laughing. And all right, I finally walked in and I said, let you guys take a walk and talk to Vince. At that point, I was livid. I was fucking madder than hell. And all I wanted Vince to say was, and the reason my ex-wife asked me was, at that time, my mortgage payment was $496 a month. We didn't have enough money in our checking account to make our mortgage payment. And all I wanted Vince to do is say, here's an advance on your salary to help me get through. I live in a small town called New Brighton, Pennsylvania. In that small town, if I don't make that mortgage payment in a short amount of time, it's going to start that I've got a mistress, I'm doing drugs, or something. None of it will be good. So I went to Vince to explain that to him because Dustin Rhodes had told me he had the same situation and Vince gave him a $10,000 advance on his salary. That was all I was looking for. And we kept going round and round and round, and all he kept saying was, I promise it's going to get better. And I said, well, okay, but I can't make my mortgage payment. And we went back and forth for, it seemed like an hour or two. And he kept saying the same thing. And finally I realized he wasn't going to say anything different. I said, do you have anything else you want to say? He said, no, but I promise it's going to get better. I said, yeah, I got that the first 20 times. I said, Vince, I don't have any choice. I got to put my notice and I quit. At that point, he got, like all pissy with me. I got over $1 million wrapped up in this character. And I said, where? And it sure as hell ain't fucking the salary. And the outfit that I was wearing had been recycled from the Body Donnas and Louis McCauley before that. What was his name at WWF? Radford. And it was the same outfit there. And the crest that was on my chest was my legitimate Bethany College crest that the school had given me permission to use. So I said, it sure as hell wasn't in salary, it sure as hell wasn't in that outfit. So where exactly do you have $1 million wrapped up in this character, Vince? And when he started raising his voice, I said, first of all, there's one man on the planet could talk to me like that. His name was George Martin. He's been in the grave since August 1993. Talk to me as a professional. Or if you think you want to yell at me, I'll treat you like I would treat any other man trying to yell at me. And he brought his voice down and then started trying to negotiate. You know, he wanted me to work a 4-month notice. I said, I'll work a 2-week notice. He said, a 3-month notice. I said, I'll work 2 weeks. So I need a month and a half. I said, I'll give you a week notice. And we finally settled on like a 3-week notice, which culminated with my last night working with them in Madison Square Garden, the Saturday after Thanksgiving 1996.
Which brings me to my next question, is can you bring us through the very last night?
Yeah, the last 2 nights we had been off. I wrestled Monday night in Richmond, Virginia at the Richmond Coliseum. 20 minutes before going live, back then they did an hour tape, an hour live, then another hour tape after. 20 minutes before 9 o'clock, Davey Boy Smith was in the ring with somebody, and he went to give a headbutt. Remember, Davey always stomped with both feet. When he went to give a headbutt, he sunk up to both knees. Both knees went straight to the mat, up to his knees. Well, they stopped the match, and an army of ring personnel converged on the ring and dismantled the ring and got it back together. And as they finished getting it together, the techs are jumping out of the ring literally as the pyro's going off at 9 o'clock for Raw to go live. I was the first match. Me and Scott Hall were the first match. Nobody ever had a chance to test the ring. So, Scott and I, of course, Vince wants me, I guess Vince thought it'll embarrass me to have to lose to Scott Hall or something. You know, I said, whatever. You know, get here and get down here and get the hell out of this shit. And I wrestled him, and Scott always had a spot. If you remember, he was just about everybody he wrestled with. You'd go to punch him, he'd block it, you'd hit the ropes, he'd block it, hit the ropes. Third time, he'd clothesline you over to the floor. Well, in a regulation ring at 6'2", that's the top rope. The top rope that's the fulcrum point. My elbow pulled as high as it'll go, hits the top rope and allows me to clear the ring. And that night when we did the spot, when I went to push the rope down, the rope was like this, it had no give. So when I went to clear for the clothesline, I teetered on the rope. And Scott did the right thing, he pushed me. So as I'm upside down, coming down the other side, it felt to me like he football punted me in the back. I felt this real quick snap in my back. When I hit the floor and I went to get up, I wasn't paralyzed, but as I told my legs to go like here, it was going over here. My legs weren't responding like I was telling them to. And the referee came to the ropes and said, get the fuck in the ring. And I said, my fucking legs aren't working. So Scott came out of the ring.
What's going through your mind right there?
Well, I'm scared. You know,
paralyzed.
I'm not paralyzed, but if my legs aren't responding, you know, you tell your finger to go here, and it goes over here, you worry a little bit. And Scott came out, and with all due respect to Scott, he was concerned. He said, fuck it, let's just stop the match. I said, because I knew how Vince thinks. If I stopped the match and I was hurt, Vince said, oh, you're trying to fuck me, and you know, cause a lawsuit or something. So I said, no, roll me in the ring, let's get to the finish. So he rolled me in the ring, and as he came in, he said, small package me, and he went to slam me. I said, no, give me your finish, which is what Vince wanted. And we argued about it for a second. He said, no, give me your fucking finish. And he picked me up with a razor's edge. Now he can, to his credit, he can do it 2 ways. He can spike you, or he can lay you down. I've watched the tape 1,000 times. He laid me down as softly as he could. But when I hit that mat, I thought I was going to shit my kidneys out. The pain was excruciating. When they rolled, after the match was over, the race in Scott's hand, they dumped me out of the ring, like a carcass. And I couldn't get up. So they sent 2 referees down to help me get back to the curtain. As we got through the curtain, they let me go and I collapsed to the floor. My legs wouldn't hold me up. And I had to crawl on army style, like this, on my elbows, for about 50 or 60 yards, past a room full of guys watching the monitor, past God knows how many office personnel, crawling down the hallway. When I got to my dressing room, still on the floor. I go to push the door open, and right as I do, I'm rooming with Dustin Rhodes. He's pulling the door open as I'm pushing it open. And he sees me, oh shit, and he helps me up and gets me around. I said, Dustin, go get a doctor, I'm hurt bad. He ran and got it 10 minutes later or so, comes back with an EMT. And the EMT gives me a slight physical, and it says, oh, you got a pretty good muscle spasm in your back. So I went home Tuesday morning thinking, I got a muscle spasm in my back. Oh, it was extraordinarily painful. I saw my family doctor at home, and he gave me a bottle of pain pills. I knew I had 2 more days, Friday night in Philadelphia, Saturday night in the Garden. And all I wanted to do was get through those dates and be done with this asshole. I was done working for this piece of shit. In Philadelphia, I took 2 bumps. I wrestled Savio Vega both nights. I took 2 bumps and had to crawl up the ropes to stand up. And that night I got back to the hotel, and through the course of that, I took about 30 Percocets and drank a case of beer and couldn't sleep. The next day, up one of the New Jersey Turnpike to New York, every pothole on that turnpike was like a knife in my back turning.
You know, it was like bump.
Every bump, it was excruciating. So I get to the Madison Square Garden, as I walk into the dressing room, Bret Hart is sitting on the right, Glenn Jacobs, then Isaac Yankem, later Kane, sitting on the left, and the doctor is sitting in the middle of the room. So I walked past the doctor and I grabbed the coat hook and slid myself down against the wall and eased myself. Right as I sat down, the doctor called me for a physical. So I walked over to the New York State Athletic Commission, was pretty stringent at that time. So as I sit down, it sort of wince from sitting down, and he said, what's wrong with you? I said, I got a muscle spasm in my back. So he starts to give me the most complete physical I've ever gotten in wrestling. Checking my reflexes, checking my spine, like a 20-minute physical. And at the end of the physical, he said, 22 years as a commissioned doctor, I've never done what I'm about to do. I said, what's that? He said, I'm failing you can't wrestle tonight. And I said, Doc, this is my last night working for this piece of shit. What's the worst that can happen? And he said, well, you present with asymmetrical reflexes, meaning I had no reflexes on one side. And he said, that indicates either a broken back or a ruptured disc. Worst case scenario, you could end up sexually dysfunctional for the rest of your life or in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. I said, well, it's the magic phrase, say no more. Well, about 5 minutes later, what's his name? Tony Gurria comes walking in. And I'm back sitting on the bench at my locker, and he walks in and Dean, you don't want to wrestle for Vince tonight? With that shit-eating grin on his face, I want to knock his teeth out his throat. And now you followed my career. I had made a name for myself as somebody that would work hard, and had done so many times in my career, as I was taught. And so to have this piece of shit saying this didn't sit well with me at all. And I could feel my fuse starting to burn. A few minutes later, I hear Vince McMahon's voice say, get Dean Douglas in my office right this minute. And that was it. The fuse had blown. I grabbed that hook and I pulled myself up and I walked in and I thought,
oh, where are you when you hear this?
I'm still in the dressing room at this point.
But you can hear it, down the hall.
I heard it down the hall.
Like he's yelling.
Him screaming like I'm some kind of piece of, like he's my dad gonna yell at me. And I walked into the room and he had, ever since Kevin Kelly whooped his ass. By the way, Kevin Kelly, you're my man.
Now we're talking about Kevin Kelly nails. Not Kevin Kelly the announcer.
No, Kevin Kelly nails and beat the shit out of him and broke his wrist and everything else.
Choked him, right?
Did a lot of things. And then walked out of the room and saw a cop standing there and said, son of a bitch is trying to grab my penis. Walked free and clear.
He didn't go to jail?
Nothing.
You think he really tried to grab his penis?
No, that covers ass. But as a result of that, Vince would never walk into a room, to this day will not walk into a room at a meeting with a wrestler alone. So when I walked in, he's got Blackjack Lanza, Rene Goulet, Arnold Skooland, Chief Jay Strongbow, Pat Patterson, Jim Ross. I mean, the room's full of people. And he's got this doctor who's a tiny thing. The doctor's shoulders were about this wide. When I shook the doctor's hand, my hand went like that around his, like 2 fingers. It was just a tiny guy, very frail. And Vince is a pretty big guy, an imposing guy. Walked
Probably,
up,
what, 6'2"?
about 6'2", and carries himself in a very powerful way. And he walked up to this doctor and he said, "What seems to be the problem here, doctor?" And the doctor said, "Well, this is no problem. This young man presents with," and he starts in medicalese. And Vince goes, "Stop. I'm a dumb fuck that doesn't understand medicalese, so tell it to me in a way that a dumb fuck like me can understand." Those were his exact words. And the doctor said, "Okay, well, this young man presents with either a ruptured disc in his back or a broken back, and without diagnostics ruling those out, I can't let him wrestle tonight. He said without a CAT scan or an MRI, I can't allow him to wrestle tonight." And Vince asked him, "What's the worst thing that can happen?" And he told him, he said, "The worst thing that can happen, this young man can have a wheelchair for the rest of his life." He never blinked. He turned to me and came up to me this close, just the chest. Comes this close and says, "Dean, you agree with that diagnosis?" At this point, all I want to do is drop this cocksucker. So I turned my head to get him out of my eyesight. My hand was just twisted away. I said, "I'm not qualified to agree or disagree with that diagnosis." And when I said that, he did this hissy fit dance. Yes, like running in a circle, and turned, did like a circle, like 3 or 4 turns, and walked at me and intentionally hit shoulder to shoulder and twisted me. The doctor grabbed me to keep me from falling down. Now, because of the way he hit me, I'm now looking out of the room. And Vince walks into the hall, and I see him stop in the hall, and he turns around and comes back in. And he cuts a promo to the doctor saying, "I've got a dressing room." He said, "I want you to pat yourself in the back, doctor, and give yourself a big thank you because you've just fucked 25,000 of your fellow New Yorkers. Because I've got a dressing room full of wrestlers with sore backs. But you're going to give this fucking pussy," this is exact words, "you're going to give this fucking pussy an excuse not to wrestle tonight." And, like that kind of, and walks out. And the doctor's about me, and he's like, "Give me the icky, like, don't knock him out or anything." So I walked back to the dressing room, and I walked down the hall and winked at my driver. So we're leaving in a minute. Arnold Schooling came and found me. And he said, "Dean, Vince wanted me to give you a verbatim message." Verbatim means, and he starts explaining what verbatim means. And I said, "Arnie, I understand. I don't know what the fuck verbatim means. Give me the message." He said, "Well," and he's trying to remember, he's going, "Vince told me to get your fucking bag, get the fuck out of the garden. Oh, that's right. He don't need your motherfucking services anymore." Okay? And as I went to walk away, he grabbed me. He went like this. Arnold Schooling's afraid of his own shadow. He looks up and down the hallway and he says, "You asked me, kid, you're doing the right thing. Take care of your back." And I elbowed him. I said, "I always knew there was a reason I respected you, Arnie." And I went about my bag and I go to the elevator. You have to take an elevator from the 5th floor down to get out of the garden. My driver's sitting there waiting, and we get on the elevator, and my driver, Damian Farron, who was the head of merchandise for ECW, knew me well enough to know, and as the door is closing on the elevator, I hear Vince's voice, "Dean, Dean." He comes running down, and the elevator is this close to closing. He puts his hand in and stops the elevator door and opens it back up. He goes, "Dean, where are you going?" And I said, "I was given a verbatim message." "What was it again?" "You want me to get my fucking bag, get the fuck out of the garden." What was that last part again? "Oh yeah, you don't need my motherfucking services anymore." Anyway, who told you I said that? I never said that. I disavowed the entire thing like a cunt. And said, "You've been advertised, you've got to at least make an appearance." And he goes, "Why don't you go out and do one of those shoot promos you're supposedly so famous for?" So like this Damien, I went, "Okay." And I could feel the horns coming out of my head and the tail growing. So I took my t-shirt off and I gave it to Baby Earl. I got my robe out and I walked out. I wasn't allowed to cut the fucking music, which is of course what I said that night. As I said, "Cut the fucking music," the director ring inside of the ring is going like this. And I said, "The Dean has some good news and I've got some bad news." I said, "I'll give you the bad news first." I said, and I used Vince's words, I said, "For those 25,000 of you New Yorkers who spent your hard-earned dollars to see professional wrestling. You just got fucked because the only real professional wrestler on the card ain't performing tonight. I said, but that's the good news. I said, the good news is Vince McMahon and his cronies wanted me, and by this time I learned what the doctor's name was. His name was Dr. Richard Byrer, B-I-R-R-E-R. He was a world-renowned neurosurgeon who had a show on A&E or something at the time.
This is in New York.
Yeah, this is the doctor who failed me.
Right.
And told me, gave me his card and said, if you have any trouble, let me know, you know. So I said, that's the good news, you know. The world-renowned neurosurgeon, Dr. Richard Byrer, told me I could end up in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. And Vince McMahon and his cronies wanted me to wrestle against that medical advice. And I paused and I looked at the camera. I said, and I told them to kiss my fucking ass. And I threw the microphone down and I come back. Now I'm expecting when I come to the curtain, someone's going to take a shot. So I've got my guard up and I'm, you know, got my fist ready to go. And I walked through and I'd never before or since ever seen the Madison Square Garden backstage area empty. There was nobody in the backstage area. I don't know where the hell they went. The dressing rooms were empty. The gorilla position was empty. The back hallway was empty. There were no. My T-shirt was hanging on a doorknob. The only two people I saw was Dynamite and Dustin Rhodes, who came to me and wished me luck and stuff, and told me they were sorry to see me leaving. But to this day, I have no idea where everybody else went. That was the last day I worked for Vince McMahon. And when I left there, I swore I'd never work for him again. And the 4 times he's called me since, I've thanked him politely. Thank you for considering me, but I'm not interested.
He's called you 4 times.
4 times.
When are these times?
Called me multiple times for ECW. Called me before ECW, his renewed ECW 2 or whatever you call it, the fake ECW. Called me before that, and he called me 1 time since to do announcing. One of these times, thanks but no thanks. I've been down that trail with you, and you fucked me once, you're gonna fuck me again. And like the old saying goes, screw me once, shame on me, shame on you, screw me twice, shame on me.
You don't think things have gotten better there?
No, from what I hear, everybody up there, no.
Same stuff.
Same stuff.
All right, when you talk about leaving, everyone else blames Shawn Michaels. You didn't. What's up with that?
Blame Shawn Michaels of what?
Your whole being pushed out, the way you were treated.
Well, I've certainly held Shawn accountable for it. Truth be known, we knew the finish months before that Regina Manitoba match ever happened. In fact, our flights into Regina, Manitoba that week for the In Your House had us going in Tuesday. I had been in Germany for 3.5 weeks prior to that. And during that tour was when we got word over there that Shawn had been beaten up by 25 guys or 20 guys, whatever it was, some ridiculous number. And when we heard it, everybody over there, his friends included, Scott and Kevin both, sort of chuckled at that because Shawn ain't a fighter. Shawn will walk 20 miles out of his way to avoid a fight. And so we're hearing this, like all these guys beat Shawn, something didn't add up, something didn't quite make sense. I got home on, I believe it was a Friday. Saturday, Davey Boy Smith called me. We were pretty good friends. And now, Davey liked to stir the shit. He liked to rib. So he called me and he said, I just want to let you know, while you've been gone, Shawn's been talking shit on you. I said, what's he been saying? He said, he's been telling me he's going to embarrass you on the pay-per-view, on the In Your House. And I said to Dynamite, or to Davey, I said, I'd like to see him try. If he tries anything cute, I'll stretch his fucking ass on that In Your House. The very next day, I get a phone call from J.J. Dillon saying, Shawn's had a relapse of his concussion and won't be performing, so we weren't needed in now till that weekend. So I instantly asked, because of my medical background, I said to JJ, I said, well, how did Shawn get hit in the head again? He said, well, he didn't get hit in the head again, he just had a relapse. I'm like, one of those relapses, you know, a relapse you don't get hit in the head. So I knew what was going on.
And he did that just to not actually drop the title.
Absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind. And when I got to the building that day, Vince sent for me. I was heading to catering. He sent for me. And when I walked into his office, what was striking to me, and it stood, as soon as I walked in, I knew something was up because Vince's office was completely dark. There was one light bulb above his table like, that he had for a desk in the middle of the floor. The rest of the room was completely dark. Well, that's strange. The owner of the company sitting in a dark room like this, you know. And he proceeds to start telling me about how much he values me, how much he loves my promos and my head for the business, and you know, just going over and above and beyond. You know, you can tell when somebody's blowing smoke up your ass. And he said, so tonight, I want you to go to the ring and get on the microphone and cut one of those promos. You get that heat you do so well with your promos. And then Sean's going to come down to the ring in his street clothes, and he will forfeit the title to you. And I went, oh, please don't do that. I said, why not? I said, since I've been a kid, I've heard champions, and I heard it tonight earlier on this shit show from Saudi Arabia. I'll spill my blood. You have to rip it out of my cold, dead fingers, right? Or until I get a little bump on the head, then I'll just hand it to you. I said, I'm sure he can super kick. Just have him super kick me and pin me, and do the match right when the time is right. But don't forfeit the belt. You'll kill it. And Vince, oh, we appreciate that, but we're committed to this, and goes into this whole routine. Now, we've been sitting talking about 45 minutes at this point, like this, face to face, in this dark room. He goes, so then Sean will hand you that belt, and he goes, at that point, why'd you go to his hand? So I look at his hand, and I follow down along his hand, and I keep following. And I look over, and Scott Hall is sitting in the shadows, over in this dark room, listening to this whole conversation.
A weird situation.
So I went back to Vince and I said, what kind of fucking game are you playing here? Oh, I don't game here and all this other kind of shit, you know. It's a bizarro world. And so he said to me, we can do whatever finish you want to do. And I said, fine, there's only one finish that's going to work. Because the fans are going to clearly see that you're taking from babyface to babyface. So when he pins me, I'll slide my leg under the bottom rope, which should technically break the count, and at least gives me some place to fire my heat back from. I said, great, we'll do that. You go back and watch that finish. I slide my leg under the bottom rope, and listen closely and see if you hear the announcer say anything about it. That's Vince McMahon. That's the way Vince McMahon does business. So when he called me those subsequent 4 times, and I don't want to go back because I don't trust the fuck, that's why.
Final question.
Square root of 64 is 8.
Vince McMahon calls you
Yeah.
and says, Hall of Fame. You won't accept it.
No.
You won't go in the WWE Hall
I'll
of
look
Fame.
in this camera and tell you I will not go into the Hall of Fame until these things exist. I will never accept Hall of Fame before Dominic Panucci, my trainer. 5-time World Tag Team Champion, clearly worthy of that. Secondly, I don't want Vince McMahon to hand me a fucking thing. You didn't pay me when I worked there, and I don't want you to hand me a fucking present so you can tell me how great you were to Shane Douglas some point down the road in your life. Now, if he would hand that over to fellow inductees, the wrestlers, the fans, the writers, I'd be honored to be in the Hall of Fame. To be acknowledged by your peers and fans as being deserving of that, I couldn't imagine a bigger accolade. But to have Vince McMahon say, here you go, Shane, I handed you the Hall of Fame. He didn't hand me anything. Everything I've earned in my career, I've earned. He didn't make for me, he didn't create, he didn't give to me. I've earned mine the hard way. And I sure as hell won't allow him at this late stage, after not ever having a thing to do with the franchise character, to not allow himself to go, ain't I great, I put Shane Douglas in the franchise in the Hall of Fame. Where did the franchise ever have anything to do with WWE?
Follow up. What about Bam Bam? He's going in the Hall of Fame.
I would proudly induct Bam Bam.
There's no one in the world that should, other than you.
Well, I'll tell you like I tell the fans, Brian, there's what makes sense, and then there's Vince world. Why Paul Heyman for Bill Goldberg doesn't make a lick of sense. So they would find somebody else.
What if the phone rings? What if the phone rings? It's Vince McMahon. He wants you to induct Bam Bam.
Absolutely.
You say yes.
No questions asked. Yes.
You're there.
Yes. Out of respect for my friend Scott Hall. Or Scott. Absolutely. Absolutely. Bam Bam certainly deserves it. His family deserves to see that for him, especially his sons and daughter. Fuck his ex. He was and is all that I think should be Hall of Fame. You know, a big guy like that working his ass off. After he put me over in the '97 November to Remember, there was no ego on Bam Bam's part. He said, why should I do a job for Shane Douglas? He did it and did so gladly for the betterment of the company and to help that along. Bam Bam had no airs about him whatsoever. And I always looked up to Scott, literally and figuratively, like my big brother. He was such a big guy. And me, him, and Candido together, Chris was like my little brother, and Bam Bam was like my big brother. You know, and the fact that my ex-wife always called me Shane. She has gotten to the habit because we were always around fans or something. She didn't want to slip and say the wrong name long before the internet became what it became. Everybody was doing it anyway. But there are two people on the planet that call me my shoot name: my mother and Bam Bam Bigelow. So when I'd hear somebody say Troy, I knew they knew me, you know. And I will miss Scott and Chris both forever. In my head, I've got them booked in Japan or somewhere else. I can't think of them as being dead and gone. In both cases, because both cases have so much irony to them. You know, Bam Bam, you know, Chris should have been dead for 10 years with pills. Finally gets himself cleaned up, gets himself back in shape. I get him hired at TNA, and he dies from a broken ankle. If there's a God, he's got a fucked up sense of humor. And with Bigelow, you know, all he wanted after his daughter was born was to see his kids and his ex-wife, which is why I said fuck you to his ex. Took the kids, put on the lamb. And Bam Bam spent a lion's share of his time and a shitload of money to locate her. Caught her 3 times, and all 3 times before she could be served paper, she took off again. And after that, Bam Bam gave up. What many people don't realize is Scott Bigelow was diabetic. Very few people knew that. I knew it because I had to make late night runs with him to go get insulin and syringes or whatever, and find 24-hour pharmacies. And told him I would never, ever, he begged me one. I said, please, Troy, don't ever tell anybody. And I never did till after he passed away. But at the end, after his wife went on the lam that 3rd time, Scott gave up and stopped taking his insulin, stopped taking all of his meds. So you hear this talk about he died from a motorcycle accident, this, that, the other thing. He poisoned himself to death. His kidneys basically shut down because he wouldn't take his meds. So, you know, but to honor him, my personal opinion about the Hall of Fame would go out the window. Scott Bigelow truly deserves to be there.
So yes, you would for Bam Bam.
Yes, in a heartbeat.
Yes, you would for Chris.
Yes, I would.
And if you were included in a class with Dominic DiNucci, you would go yourself.
With Dominic, yes. With Dominic, absolutely. I'd be honored to stand next to Dominic up there. I mean, fuck. I mean, I idolize this guy. But, you know, I just don't see it happening to me. To me, I see it as Vince making business decisions. This guy can sell more tickets than that guy, so I'm going to take this guy instead of that guy. You know, Vince and I are never going to see eye to eye. And Vince ought to know by now he's not going to whip me into conformity. And I know by now he's not going to kiss me on the cheek when he sees me, and I don't expect it. But I think it becomes, it starts to boil into a bit of absurdity when you start putting this guy in the Hall of Fame, but not this guy. You know, how is Ivan Koloff not in the Hall of Fame? How is Dominic DiNucci not in the Hall of Fame? So many guys from that generation not in the Hall of Fame. How can you have Donald Trump, Snoop Dogg, or the guy that does The Price is Right in the Hall of Fame, and not Donald
Rock.
Trump. Right. And nothing against any of those guys. It's the WWF Hall of Fame, WWE, whatever. I still say WWF, but it doesn't say the Celebrity Hall of Fame. It doesn't say the Snoop Doggy Dogg or the Rap Hall of Fame. It says the WWE Hall of Fame. Just to remind everybody, Dominic DeNucci was a 5-time World Tag Team Champion in the WWF. So I would say that pretty much should guarantee it. The fact in Ivan Koloff's case, the fact that Ivan Koloff, that Bruno Sammartino allowed Ivan Koloff to beat him for the world title. One of the only 2 guys that ever did it, him and Billy Graham. Bruno, I know Bruno, and Bruno would not have done it because the company told him to do it. Bruno would have told him to fuck off. Not in those words. But if he laid down for those guys, it's because he knew that those guys were capable of carrying that belt. And that they're not in the Hall of Fame, I think, looks worse for the WWE than it does for me out here talking about or anybody else. But to reiterate, I would happily induct Bam Bam or Chris Candido or Dominic W. God, I'd be out of my mind giddy to induct Dominic. But if I get the phone call for me to go to the Hall of Fame, I want no parts of it, not until they change the formatting for how they make the decisions, or until those guys I mentioned are in.
Thank you very much, franchise. It is a pleasure and an honor.
I was going to see you.
Always.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you very much for joining us here on the Royal Ramble. This is the Roundtable Discussion, and this is the franchise.